Hi, it's Maija here, and today I'm going to be talking about books 117 to 123 that I read this year. These are 5 books and 2 comics that I read in November, and I did read 5 other comics in November, but I will do a separate video of those. There are timestamps below, as always, to all the books and comics that I will be talking about, so that you can jump to the ones that most interest you, but let's get started. The first book that I finished in November was Robin Hobb's The Dragon Keeper, which is the first book in the Rainwild Chronicles, and I actually read most of this in October, and I finished it by reading the last chapter in November. This book was clearly a setup book for this 4-book series. It's very interesting setup, but still setup. I heard in an interview with Robin Hobb that she actually wrote the first and second books as one book, but the book grew too long, so she split it into 2. So that might explain why this is clearly just introducing the characters and getting them into places for their journey. This has multiple point of view characters, and this focuses on characters who haven't been in Hobb's other books. There's Alice, who is a woman from Bingtown who loves studying dragons and elderlings. She is in a loveless marriage of convenience, and when she gets the chance to go and travel upriver to the Rainwilds to see dragons, she jumps at the chance because she sees this as like the only pleasurable thing that she has left to do in her life, basically. So she puts her all into it. And then there's Cedric, who is her husband's secretary and also, unbeknownst to her, his lover. Her husband is displeased with Cedric at the moment, so as a punishment he sends Cedric along to Alice's journey, even though that's not something that Cedric is interested in. There's also Themara, who is this heavily marked Rainwilder, so she has things like dragon scales and claws, and she hires herself as a dragon keeper because she wants to forge some kind of life for herself away from her parents, because people on Rainwilds who are heavily marked aren't really given a lot of chances. There are also a few other point of view characters, one of them being a dragon. Much like Hobb's other books, this is well written, character focused and slow moving. I am very much invested in Alice and Cedric especially already. They are both trying to make the best out of a bad situation. Cedric especially in true Hobb fashion, making some bad decisions on the way, and I can't wait to continue with the series. I already own the second book on my Kindle, and that's where I read this one, and I gave this one 4 stars. Then I took part in November's AYearathon. The theme for the month was to read NaNoWriMo winners, and I only own one of those, and that is Erin Morgenstern's The Night Circus, and I wasn't feeling like reading that. But there's also an extra challenge always, and the challenge was to read the shortest book on your TBR, and I decided to just continue reading the shortest books on my TBR in order. So at 24 pages I read Mona by Leigh Alexander. This is a short story that I thought would be a horror short story, but it was more a story about horror. I picked this one up on Gumroad because it has illustrations by Emily Carroll, so that raised my interest. And it says to be part modern original fiction and part tribute to Silent Hill 2. It's also about the main character's ambition and trying to make it. In the end, it wasn't a very memorable story for me. I was expecting something else. It was well written, but I thought it would be a horror story. That was my bad. And I haven't played Silent Hill 2, so this was perhaps not aimed at me. The story had 3 illustrations by Emily Carroll. She has also done the cover, and the illustrations are good as always, but not my favorite from her. And I gave this one like 2.5 stars. Next, at 36 pages, I read What Is Left by Rosemary Valero-O'Connell, and this is a science fiction comic that I bought from Shortbox. And I bought it because the blurb sounded interesting, and also it seemed like it had really gorgeous art, and it really did. The art is really good in this one. The colors are perfectly chosen, and the line work is so clean. So the premise of this is that there's this spaceship that runs on the memories of one of its occupants, and the engine malfunctions and collapses in on itself, and only one engineer survives, but she finds herself stranded in these memories of someone else's life. This did so much in so little, like it's a very short science fiction story, but those ideas and that world building, and also because the art is to die for, I really liked it. It didn't quite hit the emotional beats that the other Shortbox comics that I have read, which were Homunculus by Joe Sparrow and Beneath the Dead Oak Tree by Emily Carroll, so I didn't quite hit those marks for me, so I gave this one 4 stars. I would have liked to show you some art of that, but it doesn't really show up well on camera because it is quite light and it's in these pink and violet tones, and I couldn't really get a good enough picture of it. Next I read another comic, and this is Your Mother's Fox by Sekar at 36 pages. This one I also ordered from Shortbox, and this one tells of a young woman who sets out to see America the way her mother did, on the back of this giant talking fox. So she borrows her mother's fox, but the fox is getting old, and this is said to be a poignant treatise on place, identity and belonging, and I found it interesting that the comic was written in second person. I did like this, but not on the level that I did the other short box comics that I mentioned, and not on the level of the other comic that I read from the same author, which was Your Heart is an Apple, which I will link in the description because she posted it on Twitter and you can read it there. I think that I might have missed some nuances, and that others might find depths and meanings in this that I didn't, and also others might connect more with the experiences of a second generation immigrant woman. And I don't think I understood everything that this comic was trying to say, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. Then I read a horror classic from 1907, and that was The Willows by Algernon and Blackwood. And this is a story of two friends on a canoeing trip. They are following the Danube River downstream through Europe, and they are near Budapest when the weather turns really bad and they have to spend the night on this tiny islet surrounded by willows. And the willows are like the creepy thing in this book. It's very eerie, the atmosphere is successfully foreboding, and even though nothing that outwardly wrong happens in the beginning, there's this feeling of wrongness from the start. It's about something old and alien beyond our world's borders, and I had a lot of fun reading this, and the writing could be at parts very beautiful. The ending was a bit abrupt, but I was sort of expecting it to be. I gave this one 4 stars. Then from my TBR I picked up The Serpent by Claire North. I think it's about 100 pages or thereabouts. I actually don't know the page count since currently this is only available as an ebook. I read it on my Kindle and there are no page numbers. This is set in 17th century Venice, and there's this mysterious games house that uses people as its pawns in these real world games of influence and power. And the main character of this is a woman called Theen who finds out she is really good at games, and the games house invites her to this game basically to decide who becomes Venice's next ruler. So there are a couple of other players, everyone is given a candidate who they are supposed to help win, and these people as pieces in their game. So there are people who owe something to the games house, and in exchange they have to give their skills for the disposal of the players. Sadly, I wasn't that interested in the story. Claire North's writing can be beautiful and poetic, but sometimes also quite ambiguous, and it often refers to you as the reader, as someone looking in on the happenings of the book with the narrator. This makes for a really interesting reading experience, but I liked it at some parts and didn't like it at other parts. I think Claire North's writing can be a bit hit or miss with people, but the people I know who have read this have really loved it. I just wasn't that taken with it, and I don't really feel a great need to continue on with this novella trilogy, but let me know if I'm wrong, and if I should. I gave this one 3 stars. Even though the readathon was over, I decided to pick up the next shortest book on my TBR, and that was The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole at 114 pages, and this was also a free Project Gutenberg book. This was first published in 1764, and it is said to be one of the first Gothic novels, and it is completely ridiculous, by which I mean it is melodramatic, it is random, it is filled with things that people living in the 1700s probably found scary or meaningful in a religious way, but I just found them perplexing. It's about Manfred, who is the Lord of Otranto, and his son dies on his wedding day, so Manfred gets this great idea to marry his son's bride-to-be instead, and that would also mean that he would have to divorce his current wife. He only has a daughter, you see, and he has to get a son in order to continue his family, and also in order for the lands not to fall in the hands of someone else. So there's at least the dangerous old man and the castle tropes of Gothic novels represented. Just to give out an example of the randomness, I mean, the son who I said dies in the beginning dies because this huge helmet falls from the sky, crushing him. Like out of nowhere. There's prophecies and ghosts, there are long lost relatives meeting, and there's these weird giant armor parts appearing. This was a fun curiosity. It did keep me reading right until the end, and the last sentence was the best part. It was so completely over the top. I was so happy that I finished the book because of that. This is not a book that I will remember for long. Like maybe I will, like giant armor parts. I won't forget that in a while, but maybe not a book that I will think about fondly. Really. I gave this one 2 stars. So those were all the books that I'm going to be talking about in this video. Let me know if you have read any of these, especially The Castle of Otranto, and what you thought about it, and I will see you in my next video.